How's your hammer, everybody? I'm PTDevil, and welcome to another episode of The Deck Doctors. In this series, we'll be looking at some of the most unplayable archetypes in the whole game, figuring out why they're so bad, and designing some new support to help make them playable. The process we'll be using is examining what it is they do, diagnosing what their problems are, and prescribing a treatment for them to be less awful. With all that said, let's get to the video. You may know if you've seen some of my other content, which I doubt most of you have, that this channel is only one half of a much larger franchise. The other half is run by my buddy Zach, better known as the Professional Idiot. As a result of this arrangement, half of the executive decisions for this channel have to come from him as well as me. So with that in mind, the next archetype is going to be his personal favorite, Blackluster Soldier. Based off of one of the more iconic monsters from Yugi's schizophrenic deck lineup, Blackluster Soldier received a moderate amount of support through the years to become a somewhat competent deck, with a very clear focus on banishing heavy beatdown and removal. Due to its OCG name being Chaos Soldier, it's actually a sub-archetype of the much larger Chaos archetype, resulting in a lot of general Chaos support cards directly supporting the Blackluster Soldier archetype as well. And while some of the Chaos monsters naturally function very similarly to some of the BLS monsters, I've elected to ignore most of them in favor of strictly sticking to the Blackluster Soldier report for the purposes of reviewing them. With all that said, let's begin the examination. We start off with the monster that started it all, the titular Blackluster Soldier. He is a vanilla ritual monster with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, and can be ritual summoned with Blackluster Ritual for a beater with no effect. Similarly, Blackluster Ritual is just a by-the-numbers ritual spell with no additional benefits or graveyard effects. Due to receiving a retrain in later years and having much better options in the ritual spell department, there's almost no reason to run this guy. Some later support can be used to give him an actual effect or two, but again, you'd be better off stacking those effects onto the retrain. Additionally, he is an Earth attribute, so he sacrifices any support for the more Chaos-centric builds in favor of, I don't know, Naturia Leo Drake Turbo. If you absolutely have to run this card for sentimental reasons, feel free to use a pre-prep variant, but don't expect to win any games with it. One potential niche use for this card would be as fusion material for Dragon Master Knight. It's a massive level 12 dragon with 5000 attack and defense. It requires the vanilla Blackluster Soldier and Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon as material, and has the following effect. Must be fusion summoned. This card gains 500 attack for each dragon-type monster you control except this card. Well, if you're looking for the most convoluted way to run over Utopia Lightning, this would probably be your best bet. It needs to be fusion summoned and can't be revived, but at least you can cheese it out with something like Fusion Tag or King of the Swamp. Despite all the upsides I mentioned, you don't want to run this. It's way too much effort for not a lot of payoff, since all you get are attack numbers. The anime version was actually better. It gained attack from dragons from either side of the field and in the graveyards. But I guess that would have been a bit too powerful for the early 2000s, I guess, so it was properly balanced. Later in the series, the GX era gave us what is arguably one of the best members of the archetype. Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning is a level 8 light warrior, same stats as the original, and has the following effect. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must first be special summoned from your hand by banishing one light and one dark monster from your graveyard. Once per turn, you can activate one of the following effects. Target one monster on the field, banish that target face up, but this card cannot attack this turn, or if this attacking monster destroys a monster by battle, after damage calculation, it can make a second attack in a row. Limited ever since its release, forbidden in the TCG for 6 years ever since the Forbidden List's release, Envoy of the Beginning has had a hard time serving his time, only completely coming off the list about a year ago. Fortunately, unlike his brother, this wasn't a result of Konami having his balls cut off and not returned to him. Rather, it was simply that the game had sped up so much that this card isn't going to win any games on his own. If you do get him out, he's bound to be able to get rid of at least one monster, but targeting removal has since fallen out of favor in the wake of negation, and a 3000 attack double attacker isn't guaranteed to run over everything your opponent controls. To add insult to injury, this card has no protection whatsoever, so your opponent will have no problem getting rid of this thing just as easily. Still though, the summoning condition more than makes up for it, giving you a powerful monster for just the tiniest amount of setup, and summoning him can also trigger the effects of some other support cards we'll talk about later. Feel free to run 2 or 3 of these, but don't expect to win anything with him alone. And this was all the members that BLS got for several years, until about halfway through the Pendulum era released what is arguably the most important members of the archetype, although the first card in this lineup didn't exactly inspire a lot of hope for the deck. Super Soldier Soul is a level 1 Earth Warrior monster with 0 attack and defense, and has the following effect. You can send 1 Blackluster Soldier monster from your hand to the graveyard. This card's attack becomes 3000 and its name becomes Blackluster Soldier until the opponent's end phase. You can banish this card from the graveyard, add 1 Beginning Night or Evening Twilight Night from your deck to the hand. You can only use each effect of Super Soldier Soul once per turn. More on that last effect later, but to sum it up, the graveyard effect is the only worthwhile part of it. On the surface, it seems like an easy way to cheese out a temporary version of the vanilla Blackluster Soldier, but then you remember that the vanilla Blackluster Soldier was shit already. The only reason I can see for using this effect would be for the use of a certain trap card we'll get into much later, but that play requires a lot more setup than this deck is capable of. The more acceptable play with this card would be to summon Linkaribo with it, then use the graveyard effect to search one of the other 2 monsters. Fortunately, BLS doesn't really care about the normal summon much, so you won't be missing out on anything with it. Now, one of the monsters you can search with this card is Beginning Night. Basically, he's Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, who spent a little too long in the dryer. He's a level 4 Light Warrior with 500 attack and 2000 defense, and he gives 2 effects to a Blackluster Soldier monster that is ritual summoned using this card as material. Once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and banish it, and if it destroys a monster by battle, it can make a 2nd attack in a row. Furthermore, if Beginning Night itself is banished from the graveyard, you can add 1 ritual spell card from your deck to your hand as a hard once per turn. Basically, he turns either of the ritual monsters into a better Envoy of the Beginning that doesn't limit you to 1 effect per turn. Additionally, if you then summon Envoy of the Beginning by banishing this card, you can search another ritual spell from your deck to potentially make a 3rd BLS monster, or recover the one on the field should it be destroyed. This is basically the heart and soul of the deck and should never be ran any less than 3. Much like the next monster, Evening Twilight Night. Same stats as the last monster, only this one being a dark monster, and a very similar effect. A Blackluster Soldier monster that is ritual summoned using this card as material gains the following effects. Once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and banish it, and also once per turn, you can banish 1 card in your opponent's hand face down until their next end phase. If this card is banished from the graveyard, you can add 1 ritual monster from your deck to your hand at a hard once per turn. The monster banishing effect is the exact same as Beginning Night, meaning if you ritual summon by using both of these monsters' material, it gives you 2 monster removal options per turn. Additionally, the second effect turns a ritual monster into a better Psy-Frame Lord Omega, being able to knock a card out of the opponent's hand for no cost. Furthermore, if you banish both cards summoned in Envoy of the Beginning, you get to search a ritual spell and a monster, making for a free ritual summon. Therefore, much like the last monster, you want to be able to max out on this one. Another thing to note is that this monster is also a miniature version of the Blackluster Soldier monster that gives similar effects, but unlike Envoy of the Beginning, this one is far from a staple in the deck. Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Evening Twilight, is a level 8 Dark Warrior, and holy hell did they waste a badass name and artwork on such a garbage card. It has the same stats as the vanilla BLS, which I'm just going to stop pointing out since all of them have it. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned from your hand by banishing all light or all dark monsters from your graveyard while you have an equal number of each, and cannot be summoned by other ways. While face up on the field, this card is also light attribute. When this card is special summoned, you can activate the appropriate effect based on the attribute of the monsters banished for this card's special summon, but you cannot conduct your battle phase this turn. Light. Target 1 monster on the field, banish it, Or Dark, banish one random card from your opponent's hand face down until their end phase. Whereas you could see running Envoy at the beginning alongside his mini-form, I can't think of a reason to run on the stretched out version of Evening Twilight Knight. First of all, he's the only no-me monster in the entire archetype, barring Dragon Master Knight, meaning that he can't be revived at all if he gets killed. This is just further salt in the wound, as he still doesn't have any protection and whatsoever, so he's bound to find his way into the graveyard sooner or later. Furthermore, while the monster summoned with Evening Twilight Knight can use their effects each turn, Envoy the Evening Twilight can't even boast that much, as his effect triggers only on the initial special summon. Oh, and speaking of which, said special summon completely destroys your graveyard setup, preventing you from summoning any other chaos monsters, especially himself, since the additional requirement of needing a perfectly even number of light or dark monsters makes it an extraordinary pain in the ass to set up. For that much effort, you'd expect an effect that would essentially win you the game, not a choice between a single targeting monster removal or a single Omega hand knockout. Don't even think about using it unless it's for lighting up a campfire, and even then you should reconsider your life choices. Alright, so with all the talk about ritual summoning, you may be wondering if they honestly expected us to continue using the shitty vanilla. Well, they didn't, though it's debatable if what we got is any sort of improvement. Blackluster Soldier, Super Soldier, really? That's what you're going with, Konami? You couldn't have gone with somebody who actually speaks English to choose a name for this one? Well, anyway, he's a level 8 Earth Warrior with the following effect. You can ritual summon this card with Super Soldier Ritual. This card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. Inflict damage to your opponent equal to its attack in the graveyard. If this card is destroyed by your opponent's card and sent to your graveyard, you can special summon one Gaia the Fierce Knight monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. You can only special summon Blackluster Soldier Super Soldier once per turn. Super Soldier Ritual lets you ritual summon any Blackluster Soldier ritual monster by tributing monsters from your hand or field whose levels exactly equal 8. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card, one light monster, and one dark monster from your graveyard. Special summon one Blackluster Soldier ritual monster from your hand, ignoring its summoning conditions. Obviously, the idea was to ritual summon this card using Beginning Night and Evening Twilight Night to give you a 3000 attack boss monster that can banish 3 cards per turn, one of which being in the hand, attack twice per battle phase, and deal a significant amount of burn damage for each monster destroyed, for an average of 6,000 damage. And with all that going on, I can't help but think you couldn't have saved some of that effect text for some actual protection? I honestly think this could have been an incredibly deadly combination of effects that would have pushed this deck into Tier 2 status at least, but as it is, it's nothing more than yet another inconsistent glass cannon boss monster for an archetype based around inconsistent glass cannon boss monsters. It's not like protection would have been too unreasonable to ask for. We're still talking about an extremely specific ritual monster that needs to be summoned by using 2 extremely specific cards as material to achieve its most usable status. But no, all we get for potential recovery is that random floating effect, which must sound strange to any of you who have never read the manga. To summarize, due to lore-related reasons, the Blackluster Soldier archetype and the Gaia the Fierce Knight archetype are inextricably linked, with several monsters of each directly supporting each other. Since the Gaia the Fierce Knight monsters are so clunky in how they interact with this deck, I've elected to ignore them in favor of direct BLS support. As for this card, with Manju, Incantations, and the mini-soldiers themselves, the ritual deck is still the most consistent build the archetype has to offer, so feel free to max out on this one. The next monster in this wave is Charging Gaia the Fierce Knight. Yes, I know! What did I just say? Sadly, a few of the Gaia the Fierce Knight monsters still do directly support the BLS archetype, so I have to at least cover those. Anyway, this is a level 7 Light Warrior with 2300 attack and 2100 defense, and has the following effect. You can normal summon this card without tributing, but its original attack becomes 1900. If this card is tributed, you can add one Blackluster Soldier monster from your deck to the hand. You can only use this effect of Charging Gaia the Fierce Knight once per turn. Oof, so close there, buddy, to being painfully average. The idea here being that you would use this card to ritual summon one of the monsters, then search a BLS monster, most likely Envoy the beginning, so you can summon it right away. However, here we find the fatal flaw the Gaia the Fierce Knight monsters have when uses BLS support, their level. The fact that they're all level 7 sounds good in theory, until you realize that the ritual spells you'll be using require exact level tributes, and the only level 1 in the deck is Super Soldier Soul, which would have been fine if Super Soldier Soul hadn't been a goddamn Earth monster. If it was a light or dark monster, then maybe I could have seen it a bit easier, but it's not, so it doesn't fucking work. If this thing special summoned himself, then you could potentially run a few single tribute monsters, then tribute summon by using this card in order to get a search off, but as it is, it's almost never going to go off. The next monster is Arisen Gaia the Fierce Knight. Here's hoping I don't end up reviewing the whole Gaia the Fierce Knight archetype by accident. Same stats as the last monster, only this one being dark, and has the following effect. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can normal summon this card without tributing. If this card is tributed, you can special summon one Blackluster Soldier monster from your hand or graveyard. You can only use this effect of Arisen Gaia the Fierce Knight once per turn. When you ritual summon a Blackluster Soldier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard as one of the monsters required for the ritual summon. Like ass I can, you level 7 prick. Same thing I said for the last monster applies here. The level is too clunky for this deck to work with consistently, so you'll almost never be able to pull it off. This one being a dark monster helps slightly, as you can tech in Effect Veiler as a level 1 light target for ritual spells and envoy fodder, but even then it's still not likely to actually work nearly as consistently as it should to justify running it in the first place. If you do decide to run it, do note that the special summoning effect does not ignore summoning conditions, so none of the monsters discussed so far can be summoned from the hand. The only one that can be summoned from the hand would be the next monster. Blackluster Soldier Sacred Soldier, again with this shit, is a level 8 light warrior with the following effect. When this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one of your banished light or dark monsters and one card your opponent controls. Return the banished card to the graveyard, and if you do, banish the opponent's card. You can only use this effect of Blackluster Soldier Sacred Soldier once per turn. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can target one level 7 or lower warrior type monster in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. And there's the magical number again. Well, to be fair, it does say level 7 or lower, so you can recycle some of the level 4s to use their effects again. And it's the only Blackluster Soldier monster that can be normal summoned if we ignore the illegal normal monster variation. However, once fucking again, we have yet another boss monster that for some reason couldn't have been asked enough to have some actual goddamn protection slapped on it. Recovery is nice, especially since the deck has a tendency of burning through its available resources at an alarming rate, but without an inherent special summoning condition, you're forced to rely on other resources just to get this guy on the field to begin with. Run by preference. And that would be all the monsters from this way, but sadly we still have a few more monsters to cover before we get into the Spell and Trap lineup. Envoy of Chaos is a level 4 Dark Warrior with 1500 attack and 0 defense with an interesting hand trap effect. During either player's battle phase, you can discard this card, then target one Blackluster Soldier monster or Gaia the Fierce Knight monster, there it is again, you control. It gains 1500 attack until the end of this turn, and if it does, every monster that battles it this turn has its attack become its original attack during damage calculation only. Once per turn during the end phase, if this card's in the graveyard, you can banish one light and one dark monster from your graveyard except this card. Add this card to your hand. Well, it's no honest, but it certainly gets the job done. A 1500 boost is nothing to sneeze at, especially when you put it on top of a 3k beater, but the fact that it also resets any boosts on any monsters that battle it, all but means it's guaranteed to run over just about anything that can be killed by battle. Additionally, he can recycle himself during the end phase by banishing a light and dark monster from your graveyard, which can also trigger the effects of beginning and evening Twilight Night in order to use his effects next turn. However, you may end up wanting to save those graveyard resources for comeback plays because the deck's overwhelming lack of protection from card effects makes the battle hand trap just a tad irrelevant. That being said, it's still a fairly competent OTK enabler when used on a super soldier that had used Beginning Night as a material to deal around 9,000 damage in a single battle phase, so running 2 or 3 of these could be considered the closest thing this deck has to an actual win condition. The next monster is Magician of Chaos. It's a level 7 Dark Spellcaster Ritual monster with 2500 attack and 2100 defense, and the following effect. You can ritual summon this card with Chaos form. This card's name becomes Dark Magician while on the field or in the graveyard. Once per turn, when the spell or trap card or effect is activated, quick effect, you can target one card in the field and destroy it. If this ritual summon card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon one Chaos or Blackluster Soldier ritual monster from your hand, except Magician of Chaos, ignoring summoning conditions. Chaos form lets you ritual summon any Chaos or Blackluster Soldier monster from your hand by tributing monsters from your hand or field, and or banishing Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician from your graveyard, whose total levels exactly equal the monster you're trying to summon. Needless to say, this pair wasn't designed with Blackluster Soldier in mind, as it was designed as generic Chaos support, so the TCG had to include Blackluster Soldier in the text as well, due to the localization mishap mentioned at the start of the episode. It's a fairly decent effect combined with an okay floating effect, but BLS doesn't actually want to cut corners when it comes to the ritual monsters. As for Chaos form itself, it's an okay ritual spell, but again, it requires you to run some rather inconsistent quote-unquote engines to make any use out of. This is because, again, it wasn't designed for BLS, but rather Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, which later inspired further support in the form of Chaos Mini, Magician of Black Chaos Max, as well as this card. Run these two only if you absolutely need to run the Gaia the Fierce Night monsters to make you feel special. I, for one, don't! And the last monster is Blackluster Soldier the Chaos Warrior. It's a Link 3 Earth Warrior with 3000 attack. It has arrows pointing to the top, bottom left, and bottom right. It requires 3 monsters with different names as material, and has the following effect. Your opponent cannot target this card that was Link summoned using a level 7 or higher monster's material with card effects. Also, it cannot be destroyed by card effects. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can activate one of the following effects. It gains 1500 attack, you can make a second attack during each battle phase of your next turn, or you can banish one card on the field. It's like Power of the Guardians, but in monster form. As in, it's a fantastic card, just not in its own archetype. It was obviously designed with BLS in mind, as it combines all the best effects, combined with some actual good protection for once, but the deck isn't nearly capable of generating enough field presence to actually summon this card. Still though, if you are able to summon him, he's sure to make quite a big difference. The attack boost is permanent, unlike Envoy of Chaos. The banishing isn't limited to monsters, unlike the other members of the archetype. And while the double attacking is a bit slow compared to Envoy at the beginning due to having to wait until the next turn to use it, the fact that he can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects means he's likely to survive the opponent's turn so he can use 2 of his effects next time. That and the fact that he's completely generic, 3 materials notwithstanding, makes him a definite staple for any deck that has at least 1 level 7 or higher monster available to them. Feel free to include him in any deck that you can make room for. That is, if and when he ever does come to the TCG, because we are talking about a Link Brains card after all. The first spell card is Primal Seed. If Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning or Chaos Emperor Dragon Envoy of the End is on the field, target 2 of your banished cards, add those targets to your hand. Well, it's really hard to argue with a free +1. Simply summoning Envoy at the Beginning means that you already have at least 2 banished cards, so you're all guaranteed to have at least some targets for it. And considering most graveyard effects banish themselves as cost, it allows for a lot of potential in reusing said effects. It's just a damn shame that it's limited to the archetype's least searchable monster, and throwing in Chaos Emperor Dragon isn't going to help anyone, seeing as he's been successfully neutered by Konami. Still though, it's a better salvage, so looking for complaints is just going to seem petty at this point. Ratios may vary depending on your deck's searching ability, but I wouldn't run any more than 2. Next up is Chaos Seed. I'm starting to see a disturbing theme in the names here. If you control both light and dark monsters, you can target one of your banished light or dark warrior monsters, add it to your hand. You can only activate 1 Chaos Seed per turn. Much like the monster in the artwork, it's kinda hard to find a reason to run this. It sounds like a better option than the previous one, considering it's theoretically easier to pull off, but then you remember the deck has no dark monsters that they would want to have on the field. Furthermore, it's limited only to monsters, and not even all of their monsters either, and you can only get 1 of them back, so it's only an even 0. The hard ones per turn is just further salt in the wound, so you can't even get the full recursion of your banished monsters, since they tend to get banished 2 at a time. Just leave this one be. Super Soldier Synthesis is yet another ritual spell card for the archetype, although this one is a lot more interesting. This card can be used to ritual summon any Blackluster Soldier ritual monster from your hand or graveyard. You must also send 1 light and 1 dark monster, 1 from your hand and 1 from your deck, to the graveyard whose total levels exactly equal 8. You can only activate 1 Super Soldier Synthesis per turn. Should all fusion eat your heart out? Jokes aside, this is actually really good. Not only does it send materials from the deck, which guarantees that you'll be able to use at least 1 of the 2 monsters you want to use as material, but it also has the ability to ritual summon from the graveyard, a feat that is shared by only 4 other cards. Since it's a proper ritual summon, you can even bring back a monster that wasn't properly summoned beforehand, which is something that most cards can only dream of. The necessity of having it be exact with the level is warranted because this amount of searching and recursion is a very valuable asset in the game, but fortunately the deck can work around this by stacking up on the level 4s. If you plan on relying on the ritual build, make sure to run 3 copies, but otherwise feel free to experiment. Next up is the field spell Gateway to Chaos. When this card is activated, add 1 Blackluster Soldier ritual monster, or Gaia the Fierce Knight monster, from your deck to your hand. Each time a monster card is sent from the hand or the field to the graveyard, place 1 spell counter on this card for each of those cards, max 6. Once per turn, you can remove 3 spell counters from this card, add 1 ritual spell from your deck to your hand. You can only activate 1 Gateway of Chaos per turn. You tried? The search on activation is pretty nice, but again, it's limited only to the ritual monsters who already have plenty of searching options available to them. The fact that it also searches ritual spells sounds good in theory, but the condition for getting the counters needed to pull it off means that your deck is already working the way it should, so by that point you wouldn't need another search. It might be a funky tech choice in some other ritual decks like Nephthys or Vendread, but as for BLS, I wouldn't bother. Their first trap card is Beginning of Heaven and Earth. I don't want religion in my card games. Reveal 3 warrior-type monsters from your deck, including at least 1 Blackluster Soldier monster, or Gaia the Fierce Knight monster! And have your opponent randomly pick 1. If they picked a Blackluster Soldier monster or Gaia the Fierce Knight monster, add it to your hand and send the rest to your graveyard. Otherwise, send them all to the graveyard. You can only activate 1 Beginning of Heaven and Earth per turn. My favorite. Slow RNG-based consistency. True, it's the only way to easily search out Sacred Soldier or Envoy the Beginning, but unless you're willing to sacrifice every copy in your deck, there's no way to guarantee you'll get what you want out of it. It can be used to set up the graveyard with Beginning Night and Evening Twilight Night, but unless you use Sacred Soldier as the 3rd, you'll still end up with a 67% chance of losing a key part of your deck in the process. Furthermore, it's a trap card, so even if the stars align and it works out exactly how you want it, you still have to wait a turn to see if you survive long enough to start making plays. Run it if you feel like, but be careful that Heaven and Earth doesn't come to hell or high water. The next trap card is Super Soldier Rebirth. Target one blacklist or soldier monster you control, send it to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon one blacklist or soldier monster from your hand with a different name from that monster, ignoring its summoning conditions. During your main phase, except this turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one blacklist or soldier monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only activate one Super Soldier Rebirth per turn. Remember how I said how the first effect of Super Soldier Soul was only good in conjunction with a certain trap card? What I wasn't referring to was the insane amount of other setup that also needs to happen simultaneously. Remember, Super Soldier Soul requires you to discard a blacklist or soldier monster and activate, so that means you need to have this card, Super Soldier Soul, and not one but two BLS monsters in order to get a shortcut for one of them. If you're running this, you're doing so as a Foolish Burial Goods target for that okay-ish recovery effect. The last card is Super Soldier Shield. It's a counter trap with this effect. When a spell or trap card or monster effect is activated that targets a monster on the field, while you control a blacklist or soldier monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. If this card is in your graveyard, you can remove one spell counter from your side of the field, set this card but banish it when it leaves the field. Oh, so that's where all the protection went. Well, it has the potential to save you from a Stray Nightmare Unicorn or Danger Bigfoot, but as we've already discussed, targeting removal isn't exactly something you can rely on nowadays. The fact that it can recover itself is cute, but the only card in the archetype that generates spell counters is Gateway to Chaos, and as we've already discussed, its usefulness in the deck on its own is negligible, and its method of gaining counters is subpar to other counter-generating tech options, like Magical Citadel of Endymion, or, ironically, Power of the Guardians, which turns out is a much better protection option than this card is in the first place. So now, what's the doctor's diagnosis? Do I even need to repeat it? At least once with every other member of the archetype, the sheer lack of protection that leaves these powerful Chaos Warriors more exposed than a drunk blonde at spring break becomes so painfully obvious that I honestly can't see why Zach likes them so damn much. For all the crazy shit that these monsters they pull off, it's kind of embarrassing how incredibly fragile they are while doing it. Second, the archetype definitely needs more consistency. It's sad how the only cards that search out key members of the archetype are either too slow, too inconsistent, too focused on the ritual monsters, or just too awkward for the deck to effectively use. The ritual build is surprisingly consistent, but that's more thanks to incantation than anything the deck does on its own, to say absolutely nothing for the poor chaos decks. More graveyard setup would also be much appreciated. A lot of the cards have some pretty good graveyard effects, and the Chaos build is basically dependent on it. There's not a whole lot that the deck can do about it other than intentionally whiffing with Beginning of Heaven and Earth. Lastly, some swarming options are desperately needed. Blackluster Soldier the Chaos Warrior is a great boss monster, but the deck can barely gather enough resources to actually summon him. Here's a barely passable Chaos deck focused on Envoy the Beginning, and here's a Ritual variant that's a lot less obnoxious and inconsistent. And now we come to the prescription part of the video. Thankfully, we don't have any erratas or localization mishaps to address this time, so let's just skip straight to the new support. We start off with the level 4 Chaos Knight based off the chibi version of Chaos Warrior. It's a Dark Warrior with 2000 attack and 500 defense, and has the following effect. If this card is summoned, you can send one Beginning Knight from your deck to the graveyard. If a Blackluster Soldier monster you control is targeted by or would be destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can shuffle this banished card into the deck. That monster is unaffected by card effects until the end phase. You can only use each effect of Chaos Knight once per turn. Right off the bat, I want to take care of my biggest gripe with the deck immediately. The ability to shuffle itself into the deck from the banish pile is a lot better protection than anything in the archetype had so far, and since he's a level 4 Dark, he's bound to be banished at some point in most BLS builds. The ability to dump Beginning Knight on summon also helps set up the graveyard to make a lot of the plays required for the deck to function, helping to alleviate some of the need to run Beginning of Heaven and Earth. Definitely worth running regardless of which build you make. Next up is Sacred Knight, obviously based off of Sacred Soldier going through the wash for a little too long. Same stats as the last monster, only this one is a light attribute, and it has a very similar effect. If this card is summoned, you can send one Evening Twilight Knight from your deck to the graveyard. If a Blackluster Soldier monster is summoned to your side of the field, you can shuffle this banished card into the deck, special summon one Warrior type monster from your hand or graveyard with a different name from that monster. You can only use each effect of Sacred Knight once per turn. First, the effect was kind of obvious after last monster, since Beginning and Evening Twilight Knight are a pair to begin with. Some quick-witted viewers may have noticed that the Dark monster searches the Light one and vice versa, which also sets up for Chaos plays if you can get the monster on the field into the graveyard, which shouldn't be too hard, let's be honest. Additionally, the Shuffle effect to bring out a monster can be used for recovery, furthering plays, and even generating material to bring out Chaos Warrior. Be sure to run this alongside Chaos Knight. Next up is the level 4 Sinful Knight. Yes, there is going to be a larger version, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, it's a Dark Warrior with 1500 attack and defense and the following effect. If this card is summoned, you can send one Super Soldier Soul from your deck to the graveyard. You can tribute this card, add one spell or trap card that lists a Blackluster Soldier monster in its card text from your deck to the hand. You can only use each effect of Sinful Knight once per turn. As opposed to the first two, this one is made primarily for setting up further plays. By milling Super Soldier Soul, you can then use its graveyard effect to search out Beginning Knight, then use this card's tribute effect to get this card into the graveyard so it can be used as material for a Chaos monster. Plus it can search out the spell trap lineup, which can include Synthesis, Primal Seed, or even one of the new ones we'll talk about later. This can facilitate a much better first turn play than anything the deck had going for it before. Much like the next monster, Morning Dawn Knight. It's a level 4 Light Warrior with 0 attack and 1500 defense, and has the following effect. If this card is summoned, you can add one Envoy of Chaos from your deck to your hand. You can tribute this card, add one Blackluster Soldier monster from your deck to the hand. You can only use each effect of Morning Dawn Knight once per turn. In contrast to the last three, it adds the searched monster to the hand, since unlike the other three targets, that's where you want Envoy of Chaos to be. Furthermore, his tribute effect searches any Blackluster Soldier monster, not just the ritual monsters, and sets himself up as banish fodder for said monster in the process. If there was ever a monster in the deck to max out on, this would probably be it. One of the new monsters you can search with this card would be Blackluster Soldier Sinful Soldier. I know that name still has that awkward redundancy bullshit in it, but at this point I just have to pick my battles here. Anyway, it's a level 8 Dark Warrior with this effect. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one of your banished light or dark monsters and one face-up card your opponent controls, add that banished card to your hand, and if you do, negate the effects of the card your opponent controls. And it has a quick effect. When your opponent activates a card or effect, you can shuffle one of your banished monsters into the deck, negate the effect, and if you do, destroy that card. You can only use each effect of Blackluster Soldier Sinful Soldier once per turn. As one of the only non-Nomi BLS monsters, he's a bit more splashable, much like his light counterpart. Plus, the once per turn negation of any effect your opponent use can be used either defensively or proactively to disrupt the opponent's plays. The fact that it's effectively a normal summonable Vortex Dragon is made a little easier in it being a level 8 without an inherent summoning condition that uses banished monsters as material for negation, which is a bit harder to build up than face-up Pendulum monsters. Even still, it does wonders for BLS and should be able to find a place in the deck. The next monster is Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Morning Dawn, another level 8 Light Warrior with this effect. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must first be special summoned by banishing one light and one dark monster, one from your hand and one from your graveyard. Monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects except this one. Banish any monster destroyed by battle with this card. You can target one of your opponent's banished monsters, shuffle it into the deck, then special summon up to 2 level 4 or lower light or dark monsters from your hand or graveyard, but banish them when they leave the field. You can only use this effect of Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Morning Dawn once per turn. Put simply, it's a 1-card Chaos Warrior. This is made even easier since his chibi form can both search him out and set him up in the process of a single normal summon. It still requires a bit of setup from the opponent to pull off, but his battle banishing effect can actually help fulfill this condition, making use of the Envoy of Chaos that you searched off of Morning Dawn Knight's initial summon to do so if need be. The last monster is Chaos Dragon Master Knight. It's a massive level 12 dragon fusion monster with 500 attack and defense. It requires a Blackluster Soldier monster and a Chaos Emperor monster as material. Must be special summoned from your extra deck by banishing the above special summoned monsters from your field or graveyard. It gains 300 attack and defense for each banished monster, and while you control this card, all monsters in your hand, field, and graveyard are treated as both light and dark. Its quick effect says you can shuffle all banished monsters into the deck, minimum 1. This card is unaffected by other card effects until the end phase. You can only use this effect of Chaos Dragon Master Knight once per turn. To celebrate Ballless Bitch finally coming off the Forbidden list, I decided to help make him a little more useful with a new boss monster. It does say Chaos Emperor monster, which can include the Dragon of Armageddon, which may be an objectively better choice, but Envoy the End still has the advantage of not going back to the deck when he leaves the field, making it a little easier to set up with him. To keep it from being too easy, I decided to make it a contact fusion, but being able to take materials from the graveyard as well, much like the equally ridiculous Armed Dragon Catapult Cannon. And what you get for that effort is a massive beater that even lightning can't beat over, a good protection effect that has some punishment in the form of needing additional setup to perform more than once, and has a chaos enabling effect that turns all your monsters into both light and dark attributes to enable further plays. All in all, a good win condition for an archetype that was surprisingly lacking in that regard. The next card is the spell card, Super Soldier Restoration. Send one Blackluster Soldier monster from your hand to the graveyard, draw 2 cards, then you can banish one light or dark monster from your graveyard. You can banish this card from your graveyard, target one of your banished light or dark monsters, and return that target to the graveyard. You can only use each effect of Super Soldier Restoration once per turn. Not the worst Pot of Greed card, mind you, since there are some BLS monsters you want in the graveyard, like Super Soldier or the non-Nomi monsters, but the real meat of the effect is that it can trigger the effects of Beginning Night and even Twilight Night, which turns this even 0 into a +1. It also recycles them with its own graveyard effect, so you can trigger them again when you banish them for your other plays. Simple consistency at its finest, folks, I don't know what else to say. And the last card is the Continuous Trap Super Soldier Retribution. If a Blackluster Soldier monster you control is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can target one Blackluster Soldier monster in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish one light or dark monster from your graveyard, set this card but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each effect of Super Soldier Retribution once per turn. This card was definitely designed with Chaos builds in mind, since the Ritual Focus variation doesn't really care about having their monsters in the hand versus the graveyard. Even still, it's welcome in either build due to it being able to instantly recycle Envoy of the Beginning so you can summon him again, as well as Envoy of the Morning Dawn to potentially make a Chaos Warrior. Additionally, the self-recycling effect also triggers the effect of Beginning and Evening Twilight Night, as if there weren't enough means to do so already, so it helps add a little more consistency to the ritual portion of the deck. Recommended at 1 or 2 depending on which deck you choose to focus on. And that concludes the new support for this archetype. Frankly, I was kinda hoping this video would be shorter, but apparently I had a surprising amount of grievances with this archetype that I never even knew about. I can see the appeal of the unconventional beatdown strategy of this archetype, but even after all this, I still don't see why Zach has been so borderline fanatical about this deck. I'll give credit where credit is due. The lore and visuals of Blackluster Soldier are fascinating, and the fact that he's one of the more iconic monsters of Yugi's deck makes him prime nostalgia bait. However, partially due to Konami's epic mishandling of the deck's gameplay mechanics, I don't feel like they were done nearly enough justice as was due to them. Perhaps that's why it has so many fans in spite of itself, and while I would like to close the chapter on this archetype, something tells me that we're not even close to being done with BLS lore in this franchise. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This went a lot smoother than last time since I finally wised up and wrote a script for this one ahead of time. I'm probably going to be sticking with this format for the next episode because it's going to be a long-ass one. But thanks again for watching, and until next time, don't get run over, and I'll see you guys later.